الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين اللهم اجعلنا منهم سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا متقبلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا التأويل اللهم افتح علينا فتوح العارفين يا فتاح يا عليم. We start as we always do, first and foremost by mentioning Allah, praising Him, thanking Him, asking Him to bless, protect, honor and compliment our beloved Prophet, our messenger, our role model Muhammadur Rasulullah, his friends, family, companions, and everyone that follows the way until the end of time. O Allah, we have no knowledge except for what you have taught us. So teach us those things that are beneficial to us. Allow us to benefit from what you have taught us. Increase us in beneficial knowledge and accepted actions. Ameen. As always, we have brothers and sisters in the community that have gone through different kinds of illnesses and procedures and surgeries. And specifically right now, our Dr. Haqqani's wife, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give all of those Muslims that have gone through some ailment, some difficulty, some struggle, that Allah relieves them. أذهب البأس رب الناس واشفي أنت الشافي لا شفاء إلا شفاءك شفاء لا يغادر سقما. O Allah, you are the healer, you are the one true healer and the source of all cures. O Allah, there is no healing, there is no cure except for your cure. O Allah, heal and cure with a healing and a cure that has no negative side effects. Ameen. Alhamdulillah, last time we made a lot of progress and we got to the generation of Imaduddin Az-Zingi. Imaduddin Az-Zingi. And this is at the time that the Crusades are in full swing, and the lands of the Muslims have now been filled and populated with many French and Roman invaders that are now living in and occupying the lands of the Muslims. And so just to give us a recap about some of the final moments we left off on, was that one of the Muslim leaders at that time, Imaduddin Az-Zingi, rahimahullah, may Allah bless and honor him, he tried to make an attempt to conquer Edessa. Edessa in modern day is Ar-Raha in Turkey. And this was a major plan and a major victory, because this fortress, this conquest of Edessa, this was the first principality, the first area that the Crusaders actually took. When the Crusaders came into Muslim lands, this was the first place that they took under the leadership of Baldwin I. And so this was the first door, the first step, the first main house into the Muslim lands from southern Europe, from the eastern southern Europe. And so if the Muslims got this, they would essentially have a huge chance at blocking off the Crusader reinforcements from coming. And so, in the year 539 after Hijrah, which is around the year 1144, Imaduddin Az-Zingi, with his full Muslim fortresses, they were able to go into the citadel, and the citadel surrendered 2 days later, and the entire citadel, the city of Edessa, was handed over to Imaduddin Az-Zingi. Now, the original ruler, Jocelyn, tried to get back into that area of Edessa, and there was some back and forth, and there was some attempts, but it was never actually taken back. Now, because of this was such a big victory on part of the Muslims, that this actually now called for a second conquest, second crusade. And so the news of Edessa's fall, of Ar-Raha, came to the people of Europe. And so Raymond, one of the kings of Europe, asked Pope Eugene III for help. But look, this major principality has been now retaken back by the Muslims. We need to now go and take these lands back. And so the second crusades are actually very short. They take place from the year 1146 of our Common Era until 1149 of Common Era. And this crusade was led by King Louis VII of France and Emperor Conrad III of Germany. Now, the Seljuk army, again, which are Turkic peoples that became Muslim and still let the Abbasid Khalifa remain in power, when they found out about the second crusade, the Seljuks are just warrior people. They are absolute fighters. When they heard about the second crusade, they came and they absolutely destroyed the German army. They absolutely destroyed the incoming German army from the second crusade. And the Seljuks really slowed down the incoming French army as well. As a result, the Crusaders then attacked Damascus, but at the end of the year 1148, the Second Crusade has ended quite badly, and Edessa is never recovered by the Crusaders. And so that's where we left off. And so now we're around the time of 1162 of Common Era. And at this point, as we mentioned, Imaduddin al-Zingi has been killed. Imaduddin al-Zingi has been killed, and his successor, Nuruddin al-Zingi, now comes into charge. Now, when we mention some of these names, sometimes these names are highly celebrated, and no doubt as they should. Just the name of Nuruddin al-Zingi, rahimahullah, 28 years of his life was spent in non-stop, constant jihad and fighting against non-Muslims. 28 years of not being at home. 28 years of being on the run, moving from this city to this city, this country to this country, this land to this land, sleeping in tents with military food. For 28 years, again, to raise the banner of La ilaha illallah, in hopes of regaining back Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa under the banner of the Muslims. And so he continued into this mission. And again, his main goal is to conquer Al-Quds. To conquer Al-Quds. And so he had a number of battles with the Christians who remained, and there's a lot of wins and losses that continue to take place, back and forth, back and forth. In the year 1162, there was they came to Hisn al-Akrad, which is in Homs in Syria, and Nuruddin suffered a major defeat against the Crusaders. Nearly his entire army was almost destroyed, and he was able to retreat safely and survive. But after that major defeat, and again, this is where you see the iman in their heart is shining for the sake of Allah, not for their own power. He said, I swear to God, wallahi, I will not take shade under a roof until I take this vengeance for myself and for Islam. That for Islam, I'm going to do this. And so after that major defeat at Hisn al-Akrad, or Crack the Chevaliers, he basically reorganized and re-strategized. And so subsequently followed by another battle 2 years later, in the year 1164. At this point, the Christian rulers and the Christian kings in Muslim lands, they started to unite together to make a united Christian army. And so you have, the Christian rulers of Antioch, Antakya, and Trablus, they all joined together. This time though, because Nuruddin spent time, he reorganized, he re-strategized, he had a major victory over them. And this was such a big defeat against them, it's not even that the local Christian rulers were aware, obviously, but this even started to now get recognition back in Europe, that the Muslims now again had a repeat major victory over us. And so this is now cause for concern. The people of Europe, the kings of Europe, the popes of Europe are now starting to think, do we need to do something again? Do we need to re-engage? How do we plan for the future? But again, as we see this mind of why Nuruddin al-Zingi is so praiseworthy, because we see, as we'll spend a lot of time today, his focus on Egypt, his focus on Misr. Because Sham, him in Sham, in again Syria, Jordan, Palestine is for a very long time not taken back by the Muslims until the end of our session today. But constantly back and forth, being taken by Muslims, being lost by Muslims, taken by the Crusaders, being lost by the Crusaders. All the while in Egypt, if you remember from a few months ago, this has now been the main fortress, the main stronghold of the Fatimid Ismailis. And again, these are very, very barely Muslim groups, and they have caused a lot of problems for the Muslims. They are very rarely have ever worked in unison with the Muslims. Most of the time, they have stabbed the back of the Muslims by working with the Crusaders to ensure their safety against the Muslims. So why is it though that Nuruddin al-Zingi wants to get Egypt? We'll see multiple times he tries to get Egypt, right? Because the area of Sham is again back and forth between Muslims and Crusaders. So there's only so many people and there's only so much land, there's only so much movement that can happen. Whereas in Egypt, there's a ton of Muslims. And an army that's not really being utilized. The Fatimids are kind of just doing their own thing here, a little bit fighting here and there. And so Nuruddin al-Zingi really wants to, look, if we can get Egypt, then from Alexandria, we have an entire port. We can then get access to the Red Sea. And then we can then surround the Crusaders from all around. We can come from the east, and we can also come from the southwest. And so that's why he repeatedly wants to get Egypt. But again, the Fatimids, they control Egypt. And again, so just to reiterate, there's a lot of Muslims in Egypt. There's a huge coast that will be a huge military benefit to the Muslims. They can get to the other side, the western side of Al-Aqsa. And obviously, because the Fatimid dynasty with their extremely heretical Ismaili, Shi'i beliefs, they're slowly starting to creep into the Muslims, slowly, but they want to get rid of that. And obviously the Fatimids have betrayed and backstabbed the Muslims a number of times. So there's multiple reasons to go and gain Egypt. And so, first attempt, Nuruddin Azingi, rahimahullah, he sends one of his primary generals, Shirko al-Ayyubi, Ayyubi, as the name will sound familiar, to Egypt. And the goal is two things. Shirko, I want you to go to Egypt. I want you to understand the situation, what's going on, who's actually in power, what does the military situation look like over there. And we didn't talk about this last time, but one of the previous Fatimid viziers, one of the previous Fatimid, not the head Khalifa, but one of the rulers, Shawar, tried to work with the Muslims and he wants his post back. He wants to be the vizier and leader of Cairo again. And so the Muslims allow that and say, fine, if we get back in, we'll take it and you can be put back into position. Shawar made a lot of promises to the Muslims. Shawar is from the Ismaili Shia. He is somebody that works with the Fatimid dynasty. But the Muslims said, look, if we can peacefully keep you, and you're not going to attack us, you will help us against the Crusaders, fine. And he made a lot of promises for protection for the Muslims. But in the Fatimid dynasty in Egypt, currently a man named Dirgham is the current vizier. Dirgham hears that the person's spot whom he took, Shawar, is now coming back. And so what Dirgham does, he now speaks to the current king of Jerusalem, the current king of Al-Quds, whose name is Amalric I. At this time, this is what they call the kingdom of Jerusalem has started. The Christian crusaders of those lands, particularly of Jerusalem, they call themselves the kings of Jerusalem. So they have consecutive kings of Jerusalem. So the current Fatimi Ismaili vizier of Egypt, he reaches out to the king of Jerusalem. Again, this is Ismailis talking to Christians. The Muslims are coming and they're trying to replace me. If you help us and defend us and protect us, we will give you money. And you know what? If you're successful, you can keep Egypt as a subordinate under your crusader states. So he's basically bribing him with a lot of money and power. Amalric, the king of Jerusalem, he accepts this. It's too good of an offer. I will have some military power, I will hurt the Muslims, and I will now get control over Egypt. So it's like a win-win for him. And the Crusaders of old have wanted Egypt for 50 years. Again, it's a huge port city, huge access to now all of Africa. And so he accepts. Sherko, from the side of the Muslims, from the Zengis, under Nuruddin Azingi, he goes out, his first attempt to get Egypt. And so, in April of 1164, he goes with his nephew, Salahuddin Yusuf al-Ayyubi, to the lands of Egypt. And now they're handling the situation in Egypt, whereas Nuruddin is now handling the armies of Syria. Sherko, again from the Muslims, he goes, he makes great pace, he even rushes past the people from the Crusaders, so he doesn't deal with the Crusaders. And he goes into Cairo and he kills Dirgham, the current head, the current vizier of the Fatimid dynasty in Cairo. And now Cairo is taken by Sherko, and Shawa, the original Fatimid vizier, is now put back into place. Upon doing that, Shawa, the Fatimid vizier, who said, please Muslims put me back and I will give you money and help and all of that, the second he comes into power, he betrays the Muslims. He says, you Muslims, you got to leave now. He tries to get them kicked out. Shawar, now that's part one of betrayal. Part two, Shawar, whose previous Fatimid vizier just spoke to the king of Jerusalem. Shawar, who's now put back into place, again from the Fatimids, the Ismailis, the Shia, he says, O king of Jerusalem, Amalric, you did not make it in time, but still come to Egypt. Still come to Egypt and let's get rid of these Muslims. So now Amalric and Sherko, they come, but they don't really want to fight. So they have negotiations and they both leave Egypt. They both leave Egypt. And so, what's the situation now? The Muslims are still just back in Syria, the Fatimid vizier is now back in Egypt, and the Crusaders are now back into Jerusalem. Nuruddin Azingi still wants to get Egypt. He knows it's a huge powerhouse. He knows how much it will benefit the Muslims. So in Rabi' al-Awwal of 562 after Hijrah, or January 1167, Nuruddin again sends Sherko into Egypt, again accompanied by his nephew Salahuddin. And what Shawar, the vizier of Egypt, he hears again that the Muslims are coming. So now he tries to try and re-navigate this entire situation. And he tries to now again get help from the Crusaders. There's a run around back and forth. The Muslims are going in and out, and they end up coming to Alexandria. The Muslims end up coming to Alexandria. Alexandria, because they never really became Shia. So they don't really like the Fatimids anyway. And obviously they're Muslims, so they don't want to be under the Crusader rule. They accept and they say, Sherko, you for the Muslims are here. Fine, you can conquer us, no problem. We don't have an issue. No problem at all. No problem at all. Sherko has to go back and do other things, so Sherko now leaves Salahuddin al-Ayyubi as the de facto leader of Alexandria. Sherko leaves and he goes back to Upper Egypt to go and now handle Shawar and the Fatimids. But the Crusaders have now just made it, and the Crusaders now make it to Alexandria, and they siege Alexandria. And it's a very harsh siege. And so some of the locals of Alexandria even now come to help. But again, the Crusaders and the Muslims, again, they don't really want Alexandria. There's no point here. So another negotiation is made. Let's stop sieging Alexandria. Let's give all of our prisoners back. Let Nuruddin, all the Muslims, let them leave Alexandria. And Sherko and the Muslims are going to leave Egypt without worry of the Crusaders. So everyone goes back into their original position. Fatimids in Egypt, Crusaders back in Jerusalem, Muslims back in the greater Syria area. Things seem okay. But Shawar, the Fatimid vizier, he goes and punishes the people of Alexandria that worked with Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. Those that surrendered and those that helped the Muslims, helped the siege of Alexandria. Now, in 1169, Nuruddin al-Zingi again tries to go after Egypt. With the alliances, but at this point now, the alliances between the Fatimid dynasty and the king of Jerusalem is now even stronger. So much so that within Egypt, Crusaders now are kind of doing border patrol. In Egypt, the Crusaders, the Christian people. So in Egypt, you go and you have checkpoints and you have gates and you have specific neighborhoods that are all Christian. And these Christian Crusaders are treating the Muslims very harshly. So the Muslims themselves, they complain to the king of Jerusalem, Amalric, that look, this is what your people are doing to us here. You are supposed to be allied with us. What's the problem? And so now Amalric, the king of Jerusalem, he comes into Egypt and thinks, look, my people are already doing their job. The Fatimids aren't doing what they're supposed to do. He's going to think, I'm going to come in and I'm going to conquer Egypt, the Crusader. So he comes in and he does a lot of damage. He's conquering cities and he's pillaging and plundering people, taking people's land and property and wealth and killing people. At the same time, the Khalifa of the Fatimid dynasty, Al-Adil, again, he's not really doing much. He's just the figurehead. He is very worried now that the Crusaders are now going to take over Egypt. And so now he goes and asks Nuruddin al-Zingi, why don't you come and help us against the Crusaders? Just 2 years ago, you were fighting the Muslims with the Crusaders. Now you're asking the Muslims to help you against the Crusaders. This is why this part of history is just everyone is fighting everyone, and nothing is really happening except for fighting, and there's no land really being gained. And this is what's frustrating on part of the Muslims, because they're trying to do good, they're trying to unite the ummah, they're trying to gain and protect Al-Aqsa. But it's this constant problem after problem after problem after problem after problem. But the Muslims, Nuruddin al-Zingi rahimahullah, is like, look, this is an opportunity. If the Fatimid Khalifa is asking me for help, maybe this is my chance. Maybe this is my chance. And so the Khalifa Al-Adil, he says, Nuruddin, if you come into Egypt and you help us against the Crusaders, against the king of Jerusalem, Amalric, I will give you 1/3 of Egypt. And I will give, land and money to your commanders. And I will let your general Sherko live in Egypt. This is a very big plus for Nuruddin. So Nuruddin accepts. Sherko and Salahuddin, they go into Egypt. Shawar, the one who is the current vizier of Egypt, he now tries to backstab everybody. He now tries to kill the very generals that are coming in to help him. This is such a big backfire that basically everyone thinks Shawar is now like crazy and is betraying everybody. So Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, he sees the treachery of Shawar. He takes him as a captive. And at this point, the Khalifa of the Fatimid dynasty himself says, bring me Shawar's head, I want Shawar dead. I'm trying to keep Egypt safe. He is now trying to betray Egypt 3 times inside out. And so, Shawar, that vizier, is killed. With that, who's going to be the next vizier? Who's going to be the next general of Cairo and Egypt? The Khalifa, the Fatimid Ismaili Khalifa al-Adid, he appoints Nur ad-Din al-Zingi and Sherko to be the viziers of Egypt. Sherko becomes the vizier of Egypt. So now the vizier of Egypt is now a Sunni Muslim, is now a proper Sunni Muslim who is connected to the army of Nur ad-Din al-Zingi. This becomes a huge plus for the Muslims and just confusion in the Fatimid dynasty. But Sherko, that Muslim general, he dies 2.5 months later. So he's only a Sunni vizier for 2.5 months in the Fatimid dynasty. But who succeeds him in Egypt, in Cairo? His nephew, Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. So now, in Egypt, you have the Shi'i Khalifa. But the one who's running the army and in charge is Salahuddin al-Ayyubi in Egypt. The Muslims in Syria are Nuruddin al-Zingi, and now you just have the Crusaders left. So now you kind of have 2 Muslim polities that are working together, although one is technically under the Fatimid Khilafah and one is under the Abbasid Khilafah against the Crusaders. But Salahuddin and Nuruddin al-Zingi are together, they're on the same page. So now it's a plan of how do we slowly get rid of the Fatimid dynasty? And so that is now the next plan. And how do we ensure that Egypt remains strong under the Muslims? So Salahuddin al-Ayyubi now becomes the vizier of Egypt. Al-Adid, the Shi'i Khalifa, loves him, gives him a lot of money, and he praises him, and he's a very great general. But Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, what he does, and what really brings him a lot of fame and a lot of success, he is really good to the people of Egypt. He gets money, he's a general, and he spends that money right back onto his people. He has money, he gives his troops a lot of money, he treats them very well. All of the previous generals and people from the military, from his uncle's army, Sherko, he treats them all very well. Usually when you have new people in power, you're all gone, you're all gone, you're all gone. He maintains status quo and rather honors them. And he continues to build his army. He's saying, Nuruddin al-Zingi from Syria, give me people. Let me build a stronger army in Egypt. The original Shi'i Fatimids see what's happening. Salahuddin al-Ayyubi is becoming more powerful. He's gaining more people. His army is becoming stronger. Everybody's starting to love him. So now they find this as a big problem. So now they try to backstab Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. They now try to backstab Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. So again they work with the Crusaders, the Shi'is in the background. They try to work again with the king of Al-Quds, Amalric, to now attack. Then they hope that Salahuddin would leave Egypt and go and fight them. And so when Salahuddin would leave Egypt to go and defend Egypt from the Crusaders, the Shi'is would just basically take over Cairo once again. However, Salahuddin has now known how they function for the past 10 years. It's like, if I leave, you're just going to, I will not have a place to come back. So he sends other people, you go and defend Egypt. I'm going to stay here in Cairo. I'm going to stay here in Cairo. And he basically found the people that were, conspiring against him, and he had them killed. After he had those head conspirators killed, all of their followers came, 50,000 people from they're called Sudanese, but they are basically from the southern part of Egypt that used to be Fatimi Shi'i. So now they come and revolt against Salahuddin. So there's another battle outside of Cairo, but Nuruddin al-Zingi comes and helps Salahuddin, and again Salahuddin is able to keep control, and the revolt was settled. But another group from the Shi'is come up, the Armenians, but again Salahuddin is now able to deal with them. And so now 2 major revolts from the Shia have now been launched against Salahuddin, but he's handled both of them, from the Armenians, from the Sudanese. And at this point, basically, Salahuddin has handled most of the major internal remaining threats from the Fatimid dynasty. At this point, it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're in Egypt, whether you're in Syria, whether you're a Christian crusader. If you were to say who is the leader of Egypt, the name is Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. The leader is Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. And so, Salahuddin al-Ayyubi now sees what's going on. And he's been here for a number of years. And he's now dealt with two major threats. And so now he needs to see, how do I ensure this doesn't keep happening? I need to go and help Muslims. I can't keep fighting just to keep a position here. And so he works with some of the Muslim judges that have been there. Al-Qadi, Al-Fadl, Muhyiddin. What are the ins and outs? Who are the main generals? How do they fight? Who are the people that they actually follow? Who are the people they actually have allegiance to? How do I build a strong, cohesive, united army that will support me, that will be Sunni Muslim, that will be able to go to Al-Aqsa one day? That is what he's continuously trying to build. And so he spends a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of focus doing that. And so at this time, Salahuddin Ayyubi is not really worrying and dealing with Al-Quds right now. He's not dealing with Jerusalem right now. His focus is, before I can even handle that, I need to be able to rule Egypt seamlessly. And then I can go and actually help and save and bring back Jerusalem to the hands of the Muslims. But the Franks now, the Crusaders, they realized, wait, how is Salahuddin now the leader of Egypt? These were supposed to be the Fatimids who were supposed to be on our side. And so now they start to speak and they start to get together. So the king of Jerusalem now talks to the Byzantine Empire. Look, we need to come after Egypt. Salahuddin is getting too powerful. He's allied with Nuruddin al-Zingi in Syria. Sooner or later they're going to combine and come after us in Jerusalem. So they want to now go and deal with Egypt. And so from the Byzantine Empire, they go and they send huge fleets to Egypt and they besiege Dimyat. They siege Dimyat in Egypt. Salahuddin sends his forces. Nuruddin also sends his forces. And Nuruddin also sent armies to Cairo so that Salahuddin can remain in control. Because the fear this entire time is if Salahuddin leaves, there's going to be an uproar and Egypt from inside out will explode. So Salahuddin stays in Cairo, he keeps control. Nuruddin is handling the Crusader armies so that they cannot intercept and help the Byzantines that are coming. And the remaining armies of Salahuddin, they go into Dimyat and they are facing the Byzantine armies at that time. Their armies, they're able to defend Dimyat from the incoming, Greek and Byzantine ships. And so the Crusaders never make it. So they have now successfully defended Dimyat from the incoming people from sea. The Crusaders never made it because Nuruddin al-Zingi's army cut them off, and Salahuddin is still sitting on his seat in Cairo. What is the goal of all of this? Syria and Egypt being connected, being united, is almost a reality. They're still not, because the Crusaders are right in the middle. But this is becoming a reality that Egypt can now defend itself under Salahuddin. The rest of the Muslims together in Syria can now defend themselves under Nuruddin al-Zingi. All there left is the Crusaders in the middle. Number two, Salahuddin has now proved himself capable. I can defend Egypt. And so the people of Egypt really start to love and honor and praise Salahuddin even more. At this point, he's basically their de facto ruler. And number three, because Muslims, their morale goes up, Muslims start to put more pressure onto the Crusaders in Syrian lands. So the Crusaders used to now only worry about Nuruddin al-Zingi. But now Nuruddin al-Zingi is knocking on their door even more because there's more morale and more energy. But now the Crusaders are now, wait, Salahuddin in Egypt, when is he going to come after us? So that's the next phase of this. Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, he asked Nuruddin, hey, can you send me my father? I want to see my father. And so when Nuruddin al-Zingi sends Salahuddin's father to Egypt, he makes one important point. That look, Salahuddin, you have now really become the de facto leader of Egypt. What you need to now start doing is, in the Friday khutbah, it depends on what country you're from. Basically, at the end of the khutbah, for like 1,000 years, the khatib would always make dua for the Khalifa. Whether it's, whoever it is, from the time of the Umayyads, from the time of the Abbasids, even now, if you go to even now you see that in lands that have actual kings and monarchs, at the end of the khutbah, they'll make dua for their king. If in some parts of India and Pakistan, the khatib is just reading a book, they will still make dua for some Mughal leader that has died like a couple hundred years ago, because they're reading from an old khutbah that was written a long time ago, and they would make dua for their leader. But in Egypt, the dua is made for the Fatimi Khalifa, not the Abbasid Khalifa. And so Nuruddin al-Zingi says, look, Salahuddin, you're now really the de facto ruler. Let's start to make this change. Let's start to slowly transition the Fatimids, Egypt, away from the Fatimids. Salahuddin al-Ayyubi is obviously, he wants to do this. He's a Sunni. He does not want Fatimid Shi'i people to be in charge, and they have betrayed the Muslims numerous times. But he's just like, I can't do that just yet. Like, I need to slowly make this progress. Like, I'm still fighting, dealing with internal struggle. If I do that, who knows, I'm going to get killed tomorrow. Like, we have a plan. It is working. Let's go through this slowly and systematically. Because Egypt has been under Fatimid rule, they've been mentioning the Shi'i Khalifa for 200 years. You don't just switch in one day, in 1 week. So it's like, this needs to be done. The Abbasid Khalifa is like, hey, rush this and let's get this going. But Nuruddin is like, look, I'm not going to stop you. You do your thing. Nuruddin, he understands. And he sends Salahuddin, a judge, to be the head judge of Egypt as well. Salahuddin with this new judge, Ibn Abi Asrun, they now start to try and slowly get rid of Shi'ism out of Egypt. They remove their Shi'i judges. They remove their Shi'i Ismaili symbols. The adhan is now removing the Shi'i phrases. And the end of this is all very slowly, not like all at once, but day after day, week after week, month after month. At the end of the khutbah, dua is made for Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali, radiyallahu anhum. And then even the Fatimid Khalifa al-Adid is now not mentioned by name, but as, oh, may Allah bless the one that supports the religion of Allah. And so that starts to become more generic. More Sunni judges are now put into place. More Sunni madrasas are now starting to be made. All of this is slowly weakening the Fatimid control. And Salahuddin is also giving the Fatimid Khalifa al-Adid less room for money and party and all of that stuff. And then the first day of the year 567 of the Hijri calendar, the first day, which is Muharram, Friday, the first of Muharram, 567, in Common Era, 1171, Al-Adid, the Fatimid Khalifa, is no longer mentioned in the khutbah. The second Friday, the 8th day of Muharram, 567 after Hijrah, in our year, 1171, is now the first time in Cairo that the Abbasid Khalifa Al-Mustadi, his name is mentioned in the Friday khutbah. And 2 days later, the final Fatimi Khalifa Al-Adid dies. And with that, Salahuddin basically like, that dynasty is done, this is now new rule. That doesn't mean Shi'ism is gone. That doesn't mean all of those remnants are gone in one day. It's still there. He's going to have to deal with it. But at least he is now clearly the de facto ruler, not under the Fatimid dynasty. They were there for 262 years. It's a very long time. So it's a very slow progress. But people, they try to revolt. They try to bring back the Fatimids. There's again a lot of small back and forth. Nuruddin, or Salahuddin, there's multiple assassination against him. There's multiple little battles and conspiracies, and people try to break things up. Salahuddin, for the most part, keeps things consistent. He keeps things under control. He has to use a lot of power, but he keeps everything under his rule, under Sunni mindset. And he now starts his progress again of slowly getting rid of Shi'i beliefs and Fatimid beliefs, slowly out of the entirety of Egypt. Now, from amongst the people that want to get rid of Salahuddin are, again, the Shi'i Fatimids that are left. They go and now talk to the people of Sicily. Sicily meaning one of the islands off of Italy. They say, why don't you come and attack Egypt? You come and deal with Salahuddin. So an army comes from Sicily by boat through the Mediterranean Sea. They arrive in July of 1174. The Muslims of Alexandria, they defend the city, and the Sicilians have to surrender. Muslims have a clear-cut victory. Clear-cut victory. Salahuddin, as he grows in power, he now goes westward. He now starts to get parts of Libya and parts of Tunisia. Again, he's trying to ensure that the reign of Egypt is now as strong as possible. He really still cannot deal with Jerusalem because the Crusader power is just too strong. So he has Egypt, he has most of Libya at this point, and now he starts to go into Yemen. Yemen, it had a Shi'i ruler who was connected to the Fatimids, but he is able to conquer Yemen as well. And by conquering Yemen, Egypt to Yemen is the control over the Red Sea. So now he controls the Red Sea, and because there's the worry, what if the Crusaders from Jerusalem go down the Red Sea and go to Abyssinia and Habasha, which is the Christian empire. And so he has that area conquered as well. He goes a little bit down south into Nubia, modern day Sudan, and now he has another major victory in the year 1173. Nubia, or northern Sudan, is now under Salah ad-Din's rule as well. And normally that part has interacted with Muslims but never became Muslim. But now much of that area of northern Sudan became Muslim. And so again, this is just a slow progress that is happening. In the year 1174 though, Nuruddin al-Zingi, he dies. Nuruddin al-Zingi, he dies, and his family appoints his son, who's like 11 years old, to be the king. And nobody in the areas of Syria want that. So in Syria now there's a lot of infighting between the Muslims, because Nuruddin al-Zingi died and nobody wants an 11-year-old king. So now everyone starts to fight within the lands of Syria. Salahuddin in Egypt, he's like, look, I'm the de facto leader. But now he needs to try and go and unite Syria. In that process though, Nuruddin, or Salahuddin, he has Egypt. He gets Hijaz, Mecca and Medina. He gets Yemen. He gets northern Nubia, meaning modern day Sudan. And again, is now trying to unite as much of this ummah as possible. And so again, the round in 1173, the Ayyubid dynasty starts to now become full-fledged. There's an assassination attempt from the Shia against Salahuddin. The next year, 1174, Salahuddin now conquers Damascus. They conquer Damascus, and now this is another huge win for the Muslims. Another huge win for the Muslims. Salahuddin al-Ayyubi goes and has a battle at Ramallah, but he is defeated by their leader, Reynald. And there's again constant back and forth now between Salahuddin and the Crusaders. Constant back and forth for about the next 10 years. And sometimes there are treaties and truces that are made. In the year 1183, Salahuddin, he conquers Aleppo, Halab. And again, that's a major victory. He conquers Mosul. Again, a huge victory. In this time, as he continues, he tries to make whatever alliances with the Crusaders, because, although they don't like them, as long as we're not constantly fighting each other. However, in the year 1187, one of the leaders of the Crusaders, Reynald, he breaks that truce with Salahuddin. Actually, breaks the truce a number of times. This Reynald is located basically between Egypt and Syria. He has the main fortress that is separating Egypt from Syria. If that land wasn't there, Egypt and Syria could become one. By Syria, again, we mean Syria, Jordan, Palestine, Sham. That land in Egypt could become one. But Reynald holds that one fortress in modern-day Jordan that is blocking this. And so now, as Salahuddin becomes more powerful, Reynald becomes very worried. Like, Salahuddin is going to come after me sooner or later. So a few times he tries to distract Salahuddin by sending armies into Medina. Muslims back to back, alhamdulillah, they're able to not even let him get close. But that causes problem, because Salahuddin is like, I can't worry about this, I got to go and defend Medina right now. And then in that year, 1187, Reynald, he doesn't just go and send an army. There are Hujjaj that are now going to perform Hajj, and Reynald goes and attacks them. Reynald, he raids a Muslim caravan while he still had a truce with Salahuddin. And this is something, look, it's one thing if you fight army to army, that's one thing. You're now fighting Hujjaj, civilians, people who are like, we are literally doing this for the sake of Allah. We do not want to fight. We're not allowed to spill blood. Salahuddin al-Ayyubi became very upset, and he swore to Allah that I am going to kill this man personally. You do this to the Hujjaj, I'm going to kill you personally. So in that May of 1187, Salahuddin gets the biggest army he has ever gone into Golan Heights with 40,000 men and 12,000 cavalry. And on the 2nd of July, he goes into the Raymond's fortress in Tiberias, and they like mine under the fortress towers so that it would basically collapse, and the Muslims are able to go in and take as many people and have huge damage against the Crusaders. As the Muslim troops, they now go after to mine a second time on the 3rd day of July. There are now, Salahuddin receives news that there's another Crusader army that's moving from the east. That guy of Lusignan is now the king of Jerusalem. He is now coming to now attack the Muslims. And so the Muslims now have to they just were able to get into this fortress. They now have to defend themselves from other crusaders coming into this fortress. And so there's back and forth. They're trying to move in and out. And the crusaders, they pass by some springs, but they don't get enough water. The Raymond of Tripoli, he tries to get his army to reach Tiberias, but he's not able to make it in time until they get out to the springs of Hittin. To the springs of Hittin. And the Muslims position themselves between the Crusader army and the water so that the Crusaders will not be able to get use of that water. And then on the 4th day of July, the Crusaders were blinded by smoke from the Muslims, from Salahuddin's army, and the Crusaders came under major attack from the Muslims. The Crusaders broke camp and they went on running in all different directions at Hittin, but they were all attacked by Salahuddin's army, who was blocking every single route. This is what is called the Battle of Hittin. So it was a major victory on part of Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. So powerful that Salahuddin captures Guy, who is now the king of Jerusalem. He captures his brother Amalric, who was the brother of the previous king of Jerusalem. Reynald, who was the king of that fortress. William V and Gerard and Humphrey, many kings of that area. He conquers all because they all tried to defend this fort against Salahuddin. And many of these kings and these noble people from Jerusalem, from the Crusaders, have now been captured. Some of them are killed, and some of them are just taken as prisoners. With that huge victory, and so many generals from the Crusaders now captured, and the king of Jerusalem himself under Muslim rule, Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, after a very long time, Muslims after a very long time, they go and they siege Al-Quds. In the year 1187, the Muslims, they now go to Al-Quds. And so that kingdom of Jerusalem by the Crusaders was defeated at the Battle of Hittin, July 4th, 1187. Many of their leaders were taken. And the siege of Jerusalem started on the 20th of September and went until the 2nd of October, when it surrendered to Salahuddin. And though Jerusalem fell, there was still some other kings still left in the areas. They fled to a number of subsequent areas, Tyre and then Belvoir Castle. And so Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, in that year, on the 2nd of October, 1187, alhamdulillah, he was able to conquer Al-Aqsa. After, how long did the Muslims not rule this land? After how long were there Christians in this land? And the problem is, when you hear about what the Christians would do during those times, just absolutely, defaming the masjid. What they call the temple today are things that they would defame. That's where they would keep, their horses, so that would be the area that the horses would, relieve themselves. That's how they treated what they would call the Temple of Solomon, what we would call Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. And so, because so now as the Muslims have Jerusalem, the Crusaders that are left, they're now basically going from castle to castle, trying to survive in whatever way they can. Obviously, the kings of Europe see this as a major problem. Jerusalem has now been taken. So they now launch the Third Crusade. The Third Crusade, which happens in the year 1189. This is led by King Philip of France, King Richard of England, and Emperor Frederick Barbarossa from the Holy Roman Empire. They want to get Jerusalem back. They want to get Jerusalem back. And because these are all major kings of European countries, it ends up being called the King's Crusade. The King's Crusade. It was partially successful. They were able to take back some lands, but it failed to recapture Jerusalem. And so what happens in these three, in the Third Crusade, there are three major sieges. There's a siege of Akkar, which is, the siege of Akkar was the first significant counterattack by the previous king of Jerusalem against Salahuddin. The siege lasted from August of 1189 until July of 1191. And the city's coastal position meant that Latin forces were unable to capture the city, and Salahuddin was unable to fully keep. So it's constant back and forth. And so Akkar, it concluded as a victory for the Crusaders. Salahuddin was not able to keep them out. After that is the Battle of Arsuf. Arsuf took place, on the 7th of September in 1191. This is where multiple kings from European background have come. And following the Crusaders' capture of Akkar, Salahuddin now tried to stop these armies. But these armies, they now fled and they moved along the coast from Akkar towards Jaffa. And following that engagement, the Crusaders secured control over the central coast of Palestine, including the city of Jaffa. So that's the second siege. Then the third major part of the Third Crusade is the Battle of Jaffa. The Battle of Jaffa. And so, because the Crusaders have now made it into Jaffa, Salahuddin al-Ayyubi wants to get rid of them. And so Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, he tries to go and he breaks into Jaffa. And he, for the vast majority, basically conquers almost the entirety of Jaffa. And there are Muslim banners being raised from that fortress. Except there's one tower that's left. There's one tower that's left. And as all the Christians are fleeing, and they meet, Richard, who's the king that basically is now like, look, Salahuddin conquered Jaffa, we're done here. They're saying, no, there's still one more tower left. And so this gives Richard, from England, again, the zeal, let's go back. Salahuddin has not fully taken it over. So they go back into Jaffa, and again, there's constant back and forth, and it just becomes a tiring mess. One day they take it, one day they lose it, one day they take it, one day they lose it. And Richard, he hears that, look, my brother John and the French King Philip are now having problems. So now my dynasty, my kingdom back in England is having problems. So now he goes back. But then he has to come back to Jerusalem because there's more further problems. So then there's constant back and forth and a headache of what's going on back in Europe. And so almost immediately after Richard goes back, Salahuddin, he comes back because he sees a chance for revenge. And when that happens, then the Crusaders come back. And again, there's a constant back and forth until everybody is just sick and tired of this. Everybody is just tired of this. The Muslims are tired of fighting. The Crusaders are tired of fighting. And so the Muslims, they leave Jaffa and they go back to Al-Quds. And they make a treaty of Jaffa. So what was the point of this crusade? To try and take back Jerusalem. The Crusaders in this third crusade did not take back Al-Aqsa. The Muslims retained control over Al-Aqsa. That's the major point number one. Major point number two is, this third crusade was unsuccessful because they did not take Jerusalem, but now they basically re-got their stronghold back into the lands of the Muslims. Number three, because again, they've been fighting for like 200 years now. Salahuddin, a part of this treaty, recognizes that, look, you Crusaders, fine. You have control of the coast, meaning of the coast of Sham. Right, the entire border of Sham, Halab, Aleppo, Tripoli, all of that is on the coast, fine, you keep it. You keep it. And one more condition that is made is, let whoever Christian wants to come to Jerusalem to do whatever religious rites they want to do, whatever pilgrimage, let him do it. So they agreed. Both sides have become exhausted. The kings need to go back to their kingdoms in Europe and to protect, their kingship back there. But again, that Treaty of Jaffa allows what? Muslims still retain control over Jerusalem. The Crusaders keep their control over Levant and the shore of the Mediterranean Sea. Christians, if they want to go and visit Al-Aqsa, they are allowed to do so. And that is basically where the third crusade ends. Shortly after this, Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, rahimahullah, will leave this world. But that is now, we are now basically almost at 1,200. We're almost at 1,200. And that is what we will leave off today. And we'll, again, this session will now be every other month. And so we will not have in February. In March will be Ramadan. April will then be the other Shaykh Mudassir. And then so we'll resume in May. That will be the time after Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, after the year 1,200. And again, we covered a lot of history. There's a lot of Crusaders mentioned. Again, as we always want to remind ourselves, we go through this history, number one, to show that sometimes we feel that Muslims are weak and disunited. So it's true. We see that around the world. It's not new. It has happened before, but Muslims, with their love of Allah, with their love of the Prophet ﷺ, with their being an ummah, they have worked together and found success and have found victory. Number two, we should never just become status quo. Yeah, I guess we lost. I guess we'll never make it. How many places exist on earth that the Muslims have been absolutely destroyed for hundreds of years? Yet there's still some Muslims left there. That you can take all the power away from the Muslims. There are still Muslims who are still living there from their forefathers who still pray in their masajid 5 times a day. And never forget that legacy. Will people be able to take out Muslims from Al-Quds? This will be the stronghold until the end of time. Will Muslims be able to wipe out, or will people be able to wipe out Muslims from any part of the world? Look, maybe they will be able to take from the corners, but at the end of the day, Muslims will come back to these lands that the Prophet ﷺ has promised. This is where the Muslim powers will be at the end of time. This is where Isa alayhi salam is going to come down. This is where, our eschatology, our future history, the end of time is going to happen. So even if, look, we do not have divine protection of places around the world, but these are places that are for sure always going to remain Muslim. And this should give us certainty, and should give us strength, should give us energy and zeal. I do not give up hope, and rather I have a zeal and an energy of, I'm going to keep doing what I can to ensure that Muslims stay here, Muslims are protected here, and dhulm and oppression is not done against my Muslim brothers and sisters anywhere around the world. Anywhere around the world. May Allah allow us to really be a lived, united ummah as much as possible. As much as possible, and keep our Muslim brothers and sisters protected, and deal with all of these oppressors, and people of genocide, and people of deception, and people of tyranny, and people of torture. May Allah save us from siding with them or aiding them or helping them. Ameen. Subhanallah bihamdihi, subhanallah al-azim, subhanakallah bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk, wa salli wa sallim ala abdika wa rasulika. Assalamu alaikum.